Do we have class today?
Actually, there are no updates in WhatsApp group. Maybe.
It's like Dinesh just paying 2 minutes. It's okay. Yeah, thanks.
Hello everyone, very good morning, good evening. Give me 1 second. Sorry for the delay. Let me share my screen. Okay, guys. So in the last sessions, what we have done, so we discussed about different table types, right? So we have kind of the permanent, transient, and then temporary. Today we are going to see so how
Dinesh,
to
recording is
create.
started, right? Dinesh?
Yeah, it started. It
Oh.
seems by default it started. Yeah, started. Okay, so by default, so whatever we are going to create, it will be applicable for permanent. Permanent is applicable for database and then schema and then tables. If you don't give any keyword, by default, it will be a permanent database. Let's say one thing here, if your database is permanent, by default, your schema also it is permanent. Whatever the schema it is going to create. If you don't mention anything, if your schema is permanent, by default, whatever the tables going to created under that schema, those also it will be permanent. We can create so transient tables and then temporary permanent table, permanent database or permanent schema, right? So now, so let's observe. So this will be nothing but it is by default, it is going to inherit the properties from the schema level. Schema level inherit the properties from the database level. So now if you don't mention, by default, it is a database. Whatever by default thing will be a permanent. Whatever the things we have created till now, we didn't mention any keyword so that, so the all these are a permanent only. All these are permanent. Now let's say if you wanted to create a transient database, if you wanted to create transient database, so how to implement that? And within that, so if you create any table, by default how it is going to take it, and then so what will be the types, so we will see that. So let's say here we'll create so transient database here. If you observe, see this one, so replace transient database name. See this is a keyword what we are mentioning here, create database. Generally we will give the database name, but before the database, what is the keyword we have given? Transient. We are giving transient. Now when you create transient also, by default, so it will be created. If you observe, show tables, sorry, show database, right? This is a database. Databases, you can able to see this one. This is a transient database which we have created. What is the option we have observed here? Transient. By default, your transient database also retention period is 1 day. See this one, this is a default retention period. Default it will be 1 day if you don't mention anything. Now what is this? So 1 day created and then transient database. Now this is a transient. We have given a keyword. Now which database it is connected? DB underscore transient database it's connected. See this here, right? And then what is the schema it is connected? Public schema it is connected. Now, if you observe this schema also, it will be a transient only. Public schema also it will be transient because database is transient. Now observe this, show schemas. Now if you observe, spelling mistake, show schemas here. This one also, see this one, transient. We didn't mention, it inherited a property from the database. Same way, for example, if I create a table here, table also by default it is a transient. Now let's observe this. Let's create a table here, one specific table. Observe this one. We are going to create a table. Create table. We are creating a table, but we are not mentioning any keyword here. Observe this. Before the table, we are not mentioning whether it is a transient, whether it is a permanent, or it is a temporary. Right? We are not mentioning. Just we are giving the name. Right? Now, when we create this, see this one. We created a table. Now refresh it. Observe that how it looks like. Which database we created? DB underscore transient. Within this database, if you observe, what is the schema? This is a public schema. Click on the public schema. And then what is the tables? See this one. This is a transient. Observe the icon here. Observe the icon. See this one. This is with setting symbol. This is with setting symbol. By default, it's created transient, right? If you wanted to mention, so anything like a temporary or permanent, you have to mention. But in transient database, you cannot able to create a permanent table. Remember this. This will be the certification question. This is a transient database. We didn't mention any keyword here. When you're creating a table, if you didn't mention any keyword, by default it is a permanent table. But where you are creating this table, we are creating this table under transient schema, transient database, right? So by default, it will inherit the property from this, and then this table will be created as a transient. Observe this one. Observe the setting symbol here, right? And then, so beside the name also, it is telling this is transient. It is mentioning clearly, this is a transient table, transient table. Now,
So
here,
we cannot create permanent schemas and permanent tables under transient DB.
not possible.
Okay.
Okay. So now, if you observe this here, see this one. So we created a transient. For example, if you wanted to create a temporary here, if you wanted to create temporary table. So now let's observe this, how to create it. We are creating under which database we are creating? Transient database. Now, if you observe here, if you wanted to create temporary, you need to mention a keyword. See this one, temporary. We are mentioning temporary keyword, but so with the same name, it will not allow. We will give a different name for this. TEMP I have given, and we are trying to create. Now see this one, we are trying to create. Now we have created it. Now refresh it. What is the keyword we have given? Temporary. Observe the icon here. Observe the icon, how it looks like. And then observe the beside the name, how what it is telling. It is telling it is clearly, it is a temporary. And then this one, if you observe here, this is like time symbol, right? This is clock symbol. So this clock symbol is temporary. This setting symbol is, this is a transient. Without these icons, so whatever we are having, that will be a permanent. That will be permanent. Now where we created this? We created this under transient database, right? Same thing, if you wanted to create it in a permanent database, then how to do that? Just we need to mention a keywords, right? So let's say, for example, let's connect it to permanent database. This is a permanent database. We connected to Let's set as a context. Now it is connected to permanent database now, right? And then this is a permanent schema. Now here, if you create anything, any table, for example, by default, what will happen by default? It will be, just a minute. If you create anything here, by default, what will happen? By default, table will be permanent table only. So by default, schema will be permanent schema, right? Let's observe this. For example, we are trying to create a table here. We are not mentioning any keyword. Then what is the database? What is the schema? Permanent schema, permanent database. So let's create it. Employees, it's created, right? So it's created. Now, if you wanted to create transient, then where we are creating under permanent database. So observe this one. What we are going to do? We are creating transient table, and then just mention that trans. Okay, transient table we are mentioning. Now we are trying to create transient table we have created. And if you wanted to create temporary table, let's observe this.
Dinesh, we can't
Again,
create the can we create the same table in the transient table? Is it possible?
yes, we can able to create, but the database is different, right? We can able to same table name, we can able to do that. Now here temporary, right? See this one, create or replace. We have, what is the keyword we have given? Temporary. And then here temp, here trans, right? Now observe this, we created. Now refresh it here. Now if you observe, see this one, this is a permanent table which we have created. This is a temporary table which we have created. This is a transient table which we have created, right? And if you observe here, so every like a table which we have created, where you created this under table, transient table, and then temporary table. But in transient database, we cannot able to create a permanent table, right? Now, so what is so here, when you create all the tables, retention period is by default, it is 1. By default, it is 1. Now, the permanent table, as we discussed, like a temporary table, as we discussed, it is going to be valid for only that particular session only, right? What we will do is, let's insert some data into this table. So after that, so we'll see how this is going to be work. Let's transient schema we have done. Let's insert some data here for this particular table.
Before you get into the insert, Dinesh, sorry, the question was, once transient table is created, can we replace to be a temporary table after that?
Not possible. Vice versa, it is possible. So you cannot, we will come to that. Okay, we will discuss on that particular topic also. So once your transient table or temporary table is created, this you cannot able to make it as a permanent, because permanent will have a fail safe, right? That is the main intention. You can create from the permanent table, you can convert it to the transient. That is possible. Okay, so now we'll come to that. Now let's observe this one. We are trying to insert the data into the table. What we are doing, we are trying to insert the data into the table. Now data is inserted. Refresh it here. Now if you observe, come to this. For example, if you observe the data here, temporary table, how many rows we have here? We have, right? 8 we have, right? We have 8 rows. Now see this one, what we, so temporary table only available for a session, only available for session only, right? Now let's come to another worksheet. See this one. If you observe data here, select star from table, observe data, you can able to see the data, right? Now the same thing, if I try to execute it in another worksheet, run, observe this, what it is telling. It is telling that we are in the same database, we are in the same public schema, but it is telling temporary does not exist or not authorized. See this one. But if you observe here in the list of the schema, if you refresh it also, see this one, you can able to see transient. We can able to see transient, but can you able to see the so temporary one? No, right? Cannot able to see temporary one. So it is not available here. Temporary one is not available here. It is only valid for a session, because when you change the worksheet, what will happen here? Session ID will change. If you observe here, if you come to history, let me refresh it. Let's observe this one. This session ID. Observe the session ID. Previous, this is the session ID which we created, the temporary tables. Now this one, observe the session ID. This is a different session ID, right? That's why we cannot able to so see that. So because it is not only valid for a particular session only. And another thing, if you observe, let's say, so here this is a still here it is not available in this worksheet. This is a different session ID. If you come to this worksheet, still it is available. Still you can able to see the table, right? See this one, temporary table, still it is available. Now still we have a data. If you execute something here, right? If you execute the query here, so we can able to see the data. Now let's observe this. Let's going to sign out, log out, and then I am going to re-log in again. Now observe what this temporary table, whether it is going to be available or not. Let's observe this.
Should not be there, right?
Yep. So see this one. If I run this, see this in the same session, right? Same session. So but it is not available. So see this one here. Can you able to see that? What happened? Temporary table will be dropped out after completion of the session, right? After the session. Now, if I we logged in, right? Log out and then log in. So the reason behind that is, if you observe the again, come to history tab, if you refresh it, observe the session ID here. Again, see this one, session ID has changed again. See this one, right? Session ID has changed, right? That's why we will call that this is only applicable for a session. Okay, so once the session is completed, once the session ID is changed, so we cannot able to see that it is not a valid. Only for that particular session only temporary tables will be available. If you wanted to create it again, so what you will do, you are going to create again in the particular thing. Let's create it. And so there's here, so two questions we need to so discuss. One thing is, can you able to create permanent table under transient database? Not possible, right? Because it will inherit the property from a so transient. So if the database is transient, table also it will be transient. Another question, certifications, some terms they will give the question like this. You can able to, for example, whether which table type it is going to create. Now observe this one. They will give some other answers and create replace table. Before that replace will give permanent. They will give like this permanent, and then So the table name they will give. They will ask the questions like, so which table it is going to create. So by default, when you're seeing the permanent, we will think that it is a permanent table only, right? But permanent keyword is not available, right? No need to mention any keyword. See this one? It is so not accepting, right? So why? The keyword itself, it is not available. No need to mention any keyword for a permanent table, right? Now observe this one. So we have, without that, we have to do that. Without that keyword, we have to create. If you use a keyword, then permanent, so the query will not be executed, right? No need to mention any keyword here. So that is the main thing. So when we are creating for a tables, now whatever the tables we created, right? It can be a permanent, a transient table or temporary table. If you observe, see this one, all these are the tables. All the tables, the retention period will be same. If you observe, see this one. By default, what is the retention period? You can able to see now, see this one, transient table, temporary in the kind. Observe this. In a kind, you can able to see which one is a transient table. So, and then which one is a temporary table. Yeah. See this one, which one is a transient table, which one is a temporary table, which one is a permanent table, right? And at the same time, you can able to see retention time. You can able to see retention time, right? So all these things you can able to see that, right? Now, for example, so we have, so how to convert, for example, different table types. Let's say it means now you have a, for example, you have a table and you wanted to
Sir,
convert that particular
sorry for
table.
interrupting, sir. Sir, you told me for
Yes,
temporary table, for permanent table, you have retention period 90 days. Yes.
yes. You have to create. We have to give the retention period for 90 days. Otherwise, default retention period for every table will be 1 day only. For databases also 1 day. For schema also it will be 1 day. By default retention period is 1. You can give maximum up to 90 days for a permanent. For the permanent database, permanent schema, permanent table, you can give default 90 days. We will see that in the next session. So how to create a default retention period, how to change the retention period. Based on that, how we can able to go for a time travel option. Okay. So
Yes,
now
sir. Thank you.
let's observe this one. So when it is coming to, so converting a, for example, so if you wanted to permanent table to transient, so what we are telling, permanent table to transient. So when it is coming to here, if you wanted to create permanent table to transient, here we are using clone option. Clone, we will discuss again what it mean by that. Okay, so clone means nothing but, for example, generally when you are creating a table, this one, what you will do is in this place, create table as, we will use this as select star from table, right? Instead of this keyword, we are using clone. We are using clone here. Just remember this. We are going to discuss more about this clone option in the coming sessions. Because of, if you mention clone, right, when you are creating a table by using a clone, it will not occupy additional storage. When you are doing this, when you are creating a table, for example, create table name as select star from table, what it will do, whatever the data is available here, the same data will come to the another table also, right? So that is a main thing, right? So instead of
What's
that,
the difference? Can you explain
difference
again? What is
is
the difference?
it is not going to occupy storage. Generally, if you create any duplicate table, what will happen? So for example, what you will do, create
For clone, it won't use the storage, or for select star from employees, it won't use. Which one? It won't use storage.
don't get confused here. Let me explain. See this one. When you use create table, create table, create table, new table, or bkp underscore table, okay, as select star from table, what it will do now? Tell me what it will do.
All the data
Whatever
from
the
employees go
whatever
to
the data
BK.
is available in employees, the same data it will be come to the bkp, right? bkp underscore, let's assume that this is employees, right? So this is a backup kind of table, right? Now let's say, for example, when it is coming to this one, what, for example, this table is 1 GB, this table also 1 GB, right? The same data it will be available here also. So both will be having a storage, right? Clear,
Yes.
right? Instead of this, both occupying a storage, what you can do is, instead of this as select star from keyword, right? We can use clone option here. Clone, when you're using clone option, it will not occupy additional storage. There is a reason behind that. We will discuss that in the coming sessions. Okay.
So
Now,
basically, the table is pointing to the same
exactly.
data location.
Table is pointing to the same location, or we can call it as a metadata. Okay,
Okay.
it will always point out to the base metadata from which we have created. Now here what you are doing, see this one, create or replace. What you are trying to do, transient table, right? Transient table, emp underscore transient, for example, one clone from, this is a permanent table, right? Employees is a permanent table here, isn't it? Right? From the employees permanent table, so we are trying to create another duplicate table as transient table. See this one, another table we are creating as a transient, right? So now observe this one. When you are doing this, what is going to be happen? So what is the name we have given? Trans1, right? So see this one, it's created trans1, right? Refresh it here. Which database we have given? Class database, public schema, class database, public schema. See this one, permanent table is available. Along with that, employee underscore trans1. See this one, it is also created. So what we are basically we are doing, so already we have a permanent table. From the permanent table, so we are making the another table as transient table. We are creating another table transient. Okay, so for testing activities or some other persons. So let's say if you don't want this to make it as a continue as a permanent table, you can drop this table later, right? And then you can use this table going forward. Same way, for example, we wanted to implement temporary table. So instead of transient, temporary table, emp underscore emp1. From which table? Again, I am using permanent table only, right? From the permanent table, I am creating a transient table. From the same permanent table, I am trying to create a temporary table, right? Now observe this one, what it will do. So what is this we have given? TMP1 we have given, or we can give TMP1. Okay, now see this spelling mistake.
RARY, temporary.
Temporary spelling is wrong. RARY.
See this one. Observe this. What happened? Created, right? See this one. So you can able to see temporary, right? So now this is permanent table. From the permanent table, we created a temporary table. This is possible, right? Now, the same way, for example, you have a transient table. From the transient table, can you able to create permanent table or not? Can you able to create temporary table or not? Right? Let's observe this. So what we will do, the same keywords we can use, right? Sorry. Can use create or replace. What you wanted to create temporary table. Temporary. Temporary table. What I will do is temp2. From which table? Transient. So what is a transient table here? This is a transient table, right? Employees underscore trans. Employees underscore trans, right? Observe this carefully, whether we can able to create it or not. From the permanent table, we can able to create transient. From the permanent table, we can able to create temporary. Now, from the transient table, we are trying to create a temporary table, right? Temporary table. So from the transient table, we are trying to create permanent. Let's observe this. This is a temporary, right? Temporary table. It's done. It's created. It's allowed, right? Okay. Now, from the transient table, we are trying to create permanent table. Now, if I remove this, what will happen? Then it will be a permanent, right? MP underscore permanent, and then clone from transient table. What is the table here? Which we are using? Which table type we are using here? Transient table. From the transient table, we are trying to create a permanent. Is it possible or not? Just observe this one now. See this. Let's run this. Observe this one. What it is telling now. What you can able to see. Transient object cannot be cloned as a permanent object. This is not possible. Why? Permanent is a higher level, right? Permanent will have fail safe option. Fail safe means it is going to have by default 7 days the period will be there with the Snowflake support team, right? So when you are using this, it will not allow you to create. So from temporary, so transient table to the permanent. Same way, you so now we have, let's assume that we have a temporary table. From the temporary table, can I able to create transient? Can we able to create permanent? Let's observe this one. So from temporary table, we will see that. Now what we observed here, from the transient table, we can able to create a temporary, fine. But from the transient table, we cannot able to create permanent. That is a higher level, right? It is not possible. Now let's observe this. Here another thing. So from what you will do is from temporary, we will take temporary table here. Temporary table. From the temporary table, we are going to create transient, right? The temporary table. Observe this. So on this particular topic, you will get so one certification question. Can you able to convert? Can you able to create the transient table from a permanent table? Can you able to create the temporary table from a transient table? Right now here what you are trying to do, from the temporary table we are trying to create so transient table. We will give trans3 here, permanent 2 or permanent, whatever it may be. See this is a temporary. From temporary to I am trying to create transient. What is the main intention behind temporary table? Temporary table will be drop out, right? After the session it will be completed. Let's assume when you created a table, you thought that okay, just I will like close all the testing related things today. After that I don't require this table. Let's create a temporary table you created. Maybe end of the day you realize that maybe I need to work this particular table tomorrow also. I have to work on the same table in the tomorrow session also I have to work. So I don't want, so to, if I like the leave that session, what will happen? So after completion of the time, it is going to drop out. If you require that particular table, what you can do? You can simply convert the temporary table into transient table. That is possible. So this one, transient table until you drop, it will be available. This is possible. This is possible. Now, from the same temporary, if you try to create permanent, if I won't give the keyword, what will happen? This is a permanent, right? So to the permanent, it is not possible. Anything from the temporary to permanent, not possible. From the transient to permanent also, it is not possible. What is the error it is telling? Right? So temporary table cannot be cloned to permanent table. What all the things is not possible? This is not possible. This is F, false, right? And then transient to permanent, this is also not possible. Remaining thing possible. From the permanent, you can create a transient table. From the permanent, you can create a temporary table. So from the transient table, you can create temporary. From the temporary table, you can create transient. All these things is possible, but only the thing is, if you wanted to create it as a transient to permanent or temporary to permanent, these two things is not possible. It's clear, right? So this is how we can, so based on the requirement, so we can able to like create this the different table types, so whenever it is required. But so if you create n number of tables also, n number of temporary tables also, after the session, automatically it will be drop out. How you will identify whether it is a temporary or not? By seeing the symbol itself, you can able to identify. This is by using a clock symbol. See this one, clock symbol, and then you can able to see this as a setting symbol. Setting symbol, clock symbol. This is a permanent table, right? So another thing is, if you observe in a show tables option, you can able to see that. So what are the different table types? What will be the retention period? One thing, when your database is transient, you cannot able to create a permanent table. Permanent table is a higher level, right? Even permanent database only you can create. In permanent database, you can able to create transient table, transient thing, right? At the same time, now for example, assume that this is a permanent database, right? This is a permanent schema. Now I wanted to create a transient schema. Now what will happen here? Let's observe this. Create schema, transient schema, schema name, transient schema. Observe this. Sorry, just I didn't mention any keyword. Need to mention, otherwise it will be a permanent, right? Transient. I'm using create or replace. Now the transient schema is created. Now observe this. By default, for which schema it is connected? Transient schema it is connected. Now if I create any table under this particular schema, then what will happen? This particular schema, what is the type of the schema? It is a transient, right? The same, so even though if you are on a permanent database, but schema is a transient. If I create any table here, by default it will be a transient only. Now observe this. We are going to create a table, employees table, under this particular schema. Which schema it is connected? This schema it is connected. Now let's observe this. We created a table, refresh it, and then observe this. See this one. What it is telling? This is a transient schema, because by default it will inherit the properties from schema level, right? This is, so we have given, so manually we have created, right? Under the permanent database, manually we created a transient schema. This is possible, right? But under the permanent database, if you wanted to create, sorry, under the transient database, if you wanted to create permanent schema, that is not possible. If you create any schema here, that will be by default. So it is, so default it will be a transient only. By default it will be a transient schema only. But there is no schema called temporary schema or temporary database. Temporary keyword only applicable for table types only. Only applicable for table types. Now, so whatever the thing, see this one, database, schema, table, it is applicable, right? Retention period, default retention period, what you have observed when you created, default retention period for all these things is 1 day. This is 1 day. And then minimum will be, minimum is 0. And then maximum is 90 days. 90 days. This is only for permanent tables only. This is only for permanent. This 90 days applicable for only permanent. By default, for everything, it will be 1 day. For a database, for a schema, for a tables, everything will be 1 day. This 90 days only for a permanent. It can be a permanent database, permanent schema, or permanent table. We need to specify. If you wanted to mention other than any default retention period, we have to specify manually here. Otherwise, if you don't specify, by default everything will be 1 day retention period only. In the next session, what we will do is, we will see so how to create retention period, how to change the retention period. Based on that, how we can able to go to the time travel option, how to see 1 week before data, exactly at that particular period of time. That is kind of a snapshot. 1 week before, for example, this particular table we created long back, and then every week, let's assume every day we are inserting some data. Now this is your final data. You can able to see that in a table. Now I wanted to see this particular table data, exactly how it looks like, the table 2 days before, how it looks like this particular table data 1 week before. I wanted to see those information, right? So then, so we can go for a time travel option. Time travel, it depends on retention period. How many days of the retention period you are going to have, those many days only you can able to go for a time travel. Otherwise, it is not possible. Okay, we will see all these things in the next session, guys. So let's come to the questions in the chat window.
Under permanent database, when you create transient schema, if you create any tables, all the tables by default are transient tables.
Yes, within the schema level.
Within the schema.
Yeah.
Other schema, if it is a permanent schema, if it is there, anything that we create there, those can be permanent.
Permanent, exactly.
Hey, Dinesh.
Can we also change transient schema to permanent schema?
No, transient schema to permanent, it is not possible. Okay, transient to permanent, that is a higher level, right? It is not possible. It will not allow.
Hey, Dinesh.
Yes.
Clone is applicable for only table, or is it applicable for table?
It is applicable for database, schema, and table, or all other objects also. We are going to discuss about that here.
Okay. So, say you explained like we can convert the permanent schema or database, whatever, to transient, but not the otherwise, the other way, right? So if we have like 100 tables already existing in a schema, so now we converted that as a transient. So the underlying tables will have that, I mean, existing tables I'm talking about. So we'll have the same retention policy, or it will reduce it to 1 day. Let's say as a permanent, we have like 30 days of retention policy. For all the existing tables, it will have like the same 30 days default,
Got
right?
it. Got your
So
question.
yeah. So what will happen in that case then?
What will happen is, see, so once it is created, so whatever the default hard coded values we have given for the retention period, right? Those will be already available. For example, till today, whatever the tables you have created, those retention table will be available by default. Maybe you have created, you have converted this particular retention period to 30 days to 5 days today.
Okay.
After this time, whatever the tables you are going to create, those tables retention period will be 5 days.
Okay.
Remaining everything, it will be as it is.
Okay.
Because
So
it
even
depends on the database, higher level.
okay. Okay. So basically, even if we if we change the particular schema to transient from permanent to transient, the existing tables will have the same retention policy. Only the
Exactly.
new tables will. Okay.
New
Okay.
tables will applicable.
So yeah, same case with the time travel as well, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
We will see more on that here.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Can we insert records? Yes. Sorry, Mohan. Tell me.
no problem. I mean, do we have a separate class on clone and stuff like that?
Yes, we are going to discuss. We have to discuss about time travel tomorrow class. After that, we will discuss about the clone implementation.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I have a question on that. So yeah,
okay.
it's better to
Yes.
yeah, ask the later. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
fine. So records insert into transient and temporary tables after cloning. And we'll copy the space. No, the main intention behind cloning, right? Cloning, it will not occupy any storage. Always it will point out the original table only. The logically it will be available, but physically it won't occupy any storage. There is some logic behind that. So at that point of time, whatever you have cloned, it won't be charged. After that clone point of time, whatever you are going to do, those implementation, those things only, there is a storage will be occupied. We have to discuss on this particular topic, Shiva. We will see that practically. Then you will understand clearly about the clone. Okay.
That means records, we can insert the records and they will
Yes,
occupy
we can do
space.
that. Yes,
They'll
we
occupy
can.
space.
When you insert after the cloning, whatever the records you are going to insert, it will occupy a storage.
Okay.
After clone.
Okay. So, Dinesh, I just want to understand, is this the concept of zero copy cloning?
Zero copy cloning? No. So yes, the cloning is nothing but a zero copy cloning only. Okay, we used to call that as a zero copy cloning. Today we didn't discuss that.
I
Okay,
thought
we
of
will discuss that.
when you said actually that topic came into my mind. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. Fine.
Dinesh, we can convert the transient table, transient table to temporary, right?
Yes, transient to temporary, we can do that. But
So
not
in that case, in that case, whatever the retention policy on that particular table, this table, this table might be like permanent to transient, and now we wanted to convert that as a temporary table. So in that case, that table might have like 30 days retention policy on that. When we convert that into a temporary table, no matter what the retention policy, period on that table, it gets dropped in immediately, right after the session.
Correct, exactly.
Correct.
So can't we
can't
get
undo
it back?
anything. We can undo anything. Yeah.
Okay. So no matter
Yes.
how many days are retention on that particular date.
Yes, Mohan.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
So please practice 1 or 2 times. That will be kind of little, will get confused kind of thing. Okay, but so 1 or 2 times if you practice the different table types, so then you can understand clearly. Okay, don't worry. Anyway, tomorrow also we are going to discuss about the same topic related to retention and then time travel option. Then we will get the one clear picture how the time travel is going to work. So how it is depends on the retention period.
So Dinesh,
Yes, Sravan. Sarvan?
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Yes, now.
For a few of the customers like healthcare or life science or the utility customer, they need to have a data for at least for 2 months, 2 quarters basically for their audit purpose from the federal government. So how that is possible if you have 90 days of retention period?
Retention period is different concept, Sarvana. So we can go back and then we can check at that particular time what is available. But anyway, your tables, right? Whatever the tables, your data is available, it is permanently, it will available years together. No matter like how many days of the retention period. It is not depends on retention period. The
No, this
data
is
will be available.
Yeah. So now this is for snapshots.
No, snapshot only.
Kind
So
of.
what happens if I want to go back and replace a snapshot of before 4 months of time now? I understand.
4 months of time, yeah. You what only the option is what you can do is you will have a like a date range parameter, right? Based on the date range. So for specific dates we can create another table, and then there you can able to get the snapshot, or we can create a specific view for that.
Manual thing then in that case.
Yes. Got it, right?
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, yes. If you don't have anything, we will wind up today. Thank you all. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Dinesh.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.